Hello everyone, I wish you peace and happiness. Are you all healthy? Today I will continue to tell you about the difficult, scarce and struggling days of Huyen and her mother. Although still unconscious on the hospital bed, Huyen and Appo's eyes are tightly closed with no reaction at all. However, deep in her hazy consciousness, she seems to hear Micah sobbing and calling for her mother, and Appo's voice choked with emotion calling her name. Those familiar sounds keep ringing, sometimes near, sometimes far, as if pulling her back. Quinn wants to open her eyes, wants to reach out and hold her child, but her body is heavy and immovable. A tear slowly rolls down from the corner of her eye, followed by another sliding down her cheek. Even though unconscious, her heart still seems to feel the calls of the people she loves most. Quinn gently moved, her eyelashes trembling before slowly opening her eyes. Her gaze was still hazy, but when she recognized Micah beside her, she immediately reached out and hugged her tightly. All the fear, pain and longing she had suppressed for so long seemed to burst out, and Huyen burst into tears, sobbing uncontrollably as she kept stroking Micah and Appo's small hair. Micah also hugged her mother, crying and calling out and quote, "Mom," and quote, sat beside the bed, looking at the mother and daughter without saying a word. He bowed his head, quietly wiping away the tears streaming down his face. After many days of worry, Huyen had finally woken up. That moment for Da was like a flicker of hope after days of sinking into despair. In the morning, faint sunlight filtered through the hospital window, casting a long streak of light across the room. Da had just woken up after a night of dozing beside the hospital bed. He slowly stood up, walked to the bedside, and looked at Huyen and Micah still sleeping peacefully. Huyen lay still on the bed, while Micah was nestled close to her mother. Seeing that mother and child were still sound asleep, Da let out a gentle sigh of relief. He didn't want to wake them, so he quietly turned and stepped outside. Da went to the bathroom, bent down to splash cold water on his face, and wiped away the fatigue from the long sleepless days. After washing his face, he adjusted his shirt and slowly returned to the hospital room. As soon as he entered the room, Da saw Micah wake up and sitting on the bed. He smiled gently, walked over and picked Micah up, placing her on the floor. Da took the child in Appo's small hand, led Micah to the bathroom. He turned on the tap, helped Micah wash her hands, then bent down to splash water on her face. Afterwards, Da took a clean towel, soaked it in water, and wrung it out thoroughly. He handed the towel to Micah and gently said, and quote, "You can wipe your face yourself." End quote. Micah obediently took the towel and slowly wiped her face. Da stood beside her watching, then reached out to adjust Micah and Appo's hair. The morning in the hospital was still quiet, only the soft footsteps outside the corridor and the quiet conversation between the uncle and niece inside. I fetched a basin of clean water and took it to the patient and Appo's room with Micah. I placed the basin on the table next to the bed, then took a clean cloth, soaked it in water, and wrung it out tightly. I approached the bed, gently wiping every part of Huyen and Appo's face. I washed slowly from her forehead down to both cheeks, then carefully cleaned her hands. Huyen remained still, her breathing steady after a long night. Micah stood quietly beside me, watching me care for her mother, occasionally glancing at Huyen and Appo's face. The morning in the hospital room was still. I patiently cleaned Huyen, then wrung out the cloth and placed it neatly beside the basin. Micah sat quietly beside the bed, gently massaging her mother and Appo's hands and feet. As she massaged, she looked at Huyen and Appo's face and occasionally softly called out and quote, "Mom," end quote. Huyen remained still, but her breathing had become more regular. Micah used her tiny hands to massage each of her mother and Appo's fingers, then moved on to gently squeeze her legs. Da stood nearby watching the scene, feeling both compassion and deep emotion. After days of worry, he now only wished for Huyen to recover so that mother and daughter could return home soon. Seeing Brother Da enter the room, Micah immediately burst into tears upon seeing him. She ran over, holding on to Da and Apo's hand and sobbing and quote, "Brother Da, I want to go home." End quote. Da quickly bent down to hug Micah, gently patting her back. End quote. "Yes, be good. Your mother is better now and brother will take both of you home. Don and Apo's, cry anymore, okay?" End quote. Micah still sniffled but obediently nestled into Da and Apo's embrace. Da led Micah back to the bedside. The uncle and niece sat down beside Huyen. Da gently took Huyen and Apo's hand and Micah also reached out her small hand to hold her mother and Apo's. Da looked at Huyen and Apo's face, his voice choked with emotion and quote, "Huyen, please wake up. Micah wants to go home." End quote. Micah leaned close to her mother, tears still lingering on her cheeks, softly calling and quote, "Mom, please wake up. I want to go home with you." End quote. The entire room fell into silence again. Only Micah and Apo's faint sobs and Da and Apo's hand still tightly holding Huyen and Apo's hand remained as if waiting for a sign from her. Da looked at Huyen lying motionless on the bed. A strange thought suddenly flashed through his mind. He recalled what had happened and wondered if Huyen was experiencing some spiritual issue. Thinking this, Da quickly stood up and went outside. He hurried to the car, opened the trunk, took out a garlic bulb, and immediately returned to the hospital room. Da sat down beside the bed, peeled a clove of garlic, removing the outer skin. He held the garlic in his hand, then gently rubbed it on Huyen and Apo's palm, then on her feet, and finally lightly rubbed it across her forehead and cheeks. As he did so, he nervously watched Huyen and Apo's face, hoping for some reaction. Micah sat beside her, also watching her mother intently, her small hand still holding Huyen and Apo's. The morning hospital room suddenly became silent, only the soft voice of Da calling, "Huyen, can you hear me?" Da and Micah sat down beside the hospital bed. Da gently took Huyen and Apo's hand, his eyes never leaving her face. End quote. "Huyen, can you hear me? Huyen dear." End quote. Suddenly Da felt Huyen and Apo's hand move slightly. He was stunned, then quickly bent down, gently shook her shoulder and kept calling her. End quote. "Huyen, Huyen, wake up." End quote. However, Huyen still had her eyes closed, showing no signs of waking up. Da became even more worried. He turned to Micah, softly instructing and quote, "Micah, sit here and watch over Mom. I will go call the doctor. He will be back soon." End quote. Micah obediently nodded, still holding her mother and Apo's hand. Da immediately stood up, hurriedly left the room and ran to the nurse and Apo's station to call the doctor. He was both relieved that Huyen had responded and anxious, not knowing what was happening to her. Seeing Da hurriedly call the doctor immediately rushed to the hospital room. He approached the bed, checked Huyen and Apo's response, called her name and gently shook her shoulder. Then the doctor took her blood pressure and checked other vital signs. However, Huyen remained still, her eyes tightly closed, with no reaction at all. The doctor looked again and then shook his head softly. Perhaps Da had mistaken her. The doctor advised Da to continue monitoring, and then return to the duty room. The hospital room door closed, leaving Da and Micah sitting silently beside the bed. Da still held Huyen and Apo's hand, his eyes full of worry, constantly wondering whether the moment just now was truly just a mistake. "I cannot accept that I was mistaken." He still sat beside the bed, holding Huyen and Apo's hand tightly, continuously calling out, End quote, "Huyen, please wake up. I know you can hear me. Huyen oi." End quote. Da and Apo's voice choked, but he persisted in calling her name. Next to him, Micah hugged her mother and Apo's arm, tears streaming down her face. End quote. "Mom, please wake up. I want to go home. I want to go home with you." End quote. These calls echoed in the quiet hospital room. In her hazy subconscious, Huyen seemed to sense Da and Appo's voice and Micah and Appo's crying. She wanted to open her eyes to respond to her children, but her body was heavy and immobile. Still deep inside she could hear Micah calling for her mother, hear Da and Appo's voice trying to call her back. A tear slowly spilled from Huyen and Appo's eye and rolled down her cheek. Seeing that tear, Da and Appo's hand tightened around hers even more. Huyen, I know you can hear me. Hang in there. Da suddenly stood up, bent down to gently shake Huyen and kept calling her name. Huyen! Huyen, wake up! Please wake up! But Huyen remained still, her eyes tightly closed, not regaining consciousness at all. Da became even more panicked, while Micah beside him burst into loud tears, hugging her mother. Mom! Please wake up! I want to go home with you! Micah and Appo's crying echoed through the hospital room, making it feel heart-wrenching. Da turned to look at the mother and daughter, then without hesitation, he hurried out of the room and ran to the nurse station to call the doctor. Doctor, please come and check on her. Quinn has responded, but she's still one and Appo's. Wake up despite being called repeatedly. Da said while pointing towards the hospital room, his eyes filled with worry and hope. The doctor hurriedly entered the hospital room, approaching Huyen and Appo's bed to check on her. This time Huyen had a reaction. Her eyes fluttered slightly, and her hands trembled gently. She tried to raise her hand, wanting to pull off the oxygen tube placed near her nose. Huyen slightly parted her lips and weakly called out a name. Micah! Hearing her mother call, Micah immediately burst into tears, slowly embracing her mother. The little girl pressed her tear-streaked face against Huyen and Appo's body, chokingly calling out, Mom! Huyen saw her daughter and tears streamed down her face. After days of being unconscious, she could finally feel her daughter right beside her. She tried to reach out and hold Micah, even though her strength was still very weak. Da sat beside her, witnessing the scene, his eyes also red. He silently wiped away his tears. After days of waiting and worry, Huyen finally truly reacted and called Micah and Appo's name. Da saw Huyen weakly holding Micah, tears streaming down his face. He didn't and Appo's want Huyen to see him cry, fearing she would worry as soon as she woke up. Da quietly stood up, turned around and left the hospital room. Reaching the corridor, he stopped, lowered his head and wiped his tears. But the more he tried to hold back, the more tears flowed. Da stood alone in the hospital corridor, quietly crying after days of staying awake and feeling anxious. Inside the room behind Micah and Appo's soft voice still called for her mother. Da heard it but didn't and Appo's turned back immediately. He just stood there, took a deep breath, tried to stay calm, and then went back inside to be with the mother and daughter. Micah gently lay on Huyen and Appo's body, wrapping her arms tightly around her mother. Huyen weakly reached out to hold her daughter in her arms, tears silently falling again. After many days of unconsciousness, she finally heard her daughter and Appo's voice and felt the small warmth she had always longed for. At that moment Da entered the room. Seeing Micah lying on her mother, he quickly and gently lifted the child down. Micah, be good. Mom just woke up, so let her lie down comfortably to breathe. Micah obediently sat beside the bed, still holding her mother and Appo's hand. Da looked at the mother and daughter and then gently said, You two stay here. I and Appo's LL go outside to buy some porridge. Huyen just woke up and needs to eat something. After saying that, Da turned and left the room. Huyen weakly looked after him, while Micah still sat close to her mother, her tiny hand never leaving her touch. Huyen gently shifted her body, trying to support herself with her hands to get a better look at Micah. Her body was still very weak, and she was already panting as she sat up. Just then, De returned to the room with a hot bowl of porridge in his hand. As soon as he entered and saw Huyen trying to sit up, he quickly placed the bowl on the table and hurried to her bedside. End quote. Don and Oppos, T try too hard you and Oppos. We just woken up and are still weak. End quote. De gently helped Huyen lie back down, then stepped to the end of the bed. He carefully raised the head of the bed, adjusted the pillow in her position so that Huyen could sit comfortably without exerting herself. Huyen turned to look at Micah, her eyes still filled with tears. Micah sat right beside her, holding her mother and Oppos' hand. De pulled the chair closer to the bed, picked up the bowl of porridge and scooped small spoonfuls. He carefully brought the spoon to her mouth, gently blew on it to cool, then fed Huyen. Huyen was still very weak, so she ate each spoonful very slowly. De patiently fed her spoon after spoon, occasionally asking softly, end quote, "Are you tired? Eat slowly, okay?" End quote. Micah sat beside her watching her mother eat, her eyes still red from the days of mourning. De continued patiently feeding Huyen until the bowl was empty. After finishing, he set the bowl aside and gently lowered the head of the bed. De adjusted the pillow behind Huyen and Oppos' head so she could rest more comfortably. Huyen is lying on the bed, tears silently streaming down her face. All the suppressed emotions after days of unconsciousness made her unable to hold back her tears. Seeing that, De pulled a chair closer and sat down beside her. He gently took Huyen and Oppos' hand, squeezing it softly as if to say that he was still here. End quote. Don and Oppos, T cry anymore. You and Oppos, reawake now, Micah is also here with you. End quote. Huyen looked at De, tears still falling. Her weak hand gently grasped his. Micah sat beside her, leaning against her mother, making the hospital room become quiet and warm after long days filled with worry. De sat beside the bed for a while and suddenly realized that Micah was nowhere to be seen. He looked around the room and called loudly, end quote, "Micah! Micah, where are you?" End quote. No response. De quickly stood up and went out into the hallway to look for the girl. Huyen looked around but couldn't and Oppos' find Micah. She gently propped herself up on the bed, trying to get up. Her body, still weak from just waking up, made her want to go to the bathroom on her own. Huyen slowly stepped down from the bed, holding onto the edge, and took each step forward. When she reached the table, her legs suddenly went weak, and she lost her balance. Huyen fell to the floor. End quote. Thud. End quote. De, who was walking in the hallway, heard the noise and immediately turned his head toward the room. Seeing Huyen lying on the floor, he hurriedly ran inside. End quote. Huyen. End quote. De quickly bent down to help her up, one arm around her waist, the other holding her shoulder. He carefully helped Huyen back to the bed and gently laid her down. End quote. You just woke up and you and Oppos re still very weak. Why did you get out of bed by yourself? End quote. Huyen softly told De that she wanted to go to the bathroom. Seeing that she was still weak, De immediately stood up, gently helped Huyen sit up, and then supported her step by step down from the bed. Micah also quickly followed behind, holding her mother and Oppos' hand with her small hand. The three of them slowly helped each other walk toward the bathroom. Huyen took each step very slowly, still feeling weak, so she almost had to rely on De. When they reached the bathroom door, De carefully steadied Huyen and looked at Micah. End quote. Stay here, let me go inside, end quote. He said softly as he gently opened the door, helped Huyen inside and then closed it. After that, De stepped outside, sat down on a chair near the door, patiently waiting for the mother and daughter. Micah stood beside him, occasionally glancing at the bathroom door. De remained seated there, his eyes fixed on the door, ready to stand up immediately whenever Huyen needed his help. As soon as the bathroom door opened, De immediately stood up, quickly walking over to Huyen. He gently supported her, helping her outside, then sat her down on a nearby chair to rest for a while. End quote. Just sit and rest, Don and Oppos. Rush, end quote, he said. Micah saw her mother sit down, then ran to get a pair of slippers, placing them in front of her feet, and carefully helped Huyen put them on. Seeing her obedient daughter taking care of her, Huyen smiled softly, her eyes welling up with tears. After resting for a while, Da helped Huyen to stand up. Micah held her mother and Appo's hand, while Da supported her on the other side. The three slowly guided each other back to the hospital room. Each step was very slow, but this time Huyen was no longer alone. Beside her were Micah and Da, always by her side. Back in the hospital room, Da gently helped Huyen to the bed and supported her to lie down. Just then, the doctor entered to check her condition. The doctor carefully examined the vital signs, asked Huyen a few questions, then turned to Da and said, "Come outside with me for a moment, I need to discuss her condition." Da nodded softly and followed the doctor out into the corridor. Inside the room, Huyen heard the voices of the two people talking outside. Curious and worried, she tried to prop herself up. Although still very weak, Huyen slowly got off the bed, supported herself on the edge, and took a few steps toward the door. She pressed herself against the door frame, trying to stay still so as not to be noticed. From the corridor, the voices of the doctor and Da still whispered softly. Huyen held her breath, quietly listening to every word, her heart anxious, not knowing what the doctor was saying about her condition. The doctor told Da that Huyen and Appo's condition still needs to be monitored further. She needs to buy some additional medication and must pay extra hospital fees. After saying that, the doctor left, leaving Da standing alone in the corridor. Da silently reflected for a long time. He bowed his head, put his hand into his shirt pocket, and took out all the little money he had left. He carefully counted each bill, each coin, but no matter how many times he counted, there wasn't an Appo's much left. Da looked at the money in his hand, his face heavy with worry. He didn't and Appo's know how to manage both paying for Huyen and Appo's medicine and having enough money for the days ahead. Hidden by the door, Huyen witnessed everything. She saw that Da only had a small amount of money left but was still quietly worried about her. Thinking about how he had cared for both mother and daughter wholeheartedly in recent days, tears involuntarily streamed down Huyen and Appo's face. She quickly raised her hand to cover her mouth to prevent herself from crying out loud, but the tears kept falling. Huyen bowed her head, feeling both compassion for Da and sorrow for the situation of all three of them. Huyen quickly wiped away her tears and returned to the hospital room before Da could notice. She tried to sit up on the bed, but her body was still too weak. She only managed to stand for a moment before staggering and having to hold on to the nearby wardrobe. Huyen hurriedly packed her and her child and Appo's clothes, stuffing each outfit into a bag, thinking only of leaving the hospital so that Da wouldn't and Appo's have to worry about the medical bills. Just then Da entered the room. Seeing Huyen sitting beside the wardrobe, he immediately rushed over and "What are you doing? You and Appo's still weak, how can you stand up by yourself?" Da quickly helped Huyen back onto the bed, gently guiding her to lie down. Huyen looked at Da, tears welling up again. "I want to go home." Da was stunned, then gently advised her. "You just woke up, you and Appo's still very weak. It and Appo's dangerous to leave now. Stay so the doctor can monitor you further." But Huyen shook her head. She took Da and Appo's hand, her voice weak, "I don't and Appo's want you to worry about the bills. I want to take Micah home." Da tried to persuade her a few more times, but Huyen still refused to stay. In the end he could only sigh, look at her anxiously and say, "All right, I and Appo's I'll go ask the doctor and see what they say. If the doctor agrees, I and Appo's I'll consider the next step." After saying that, Da stood up, turned around and went out to find the doctor, while Huyen lay quietly on the bed, her hand still clutching the bag of clothes she had packed. De went to the doctor and Appo's room, anxiously asking about Huyen and Appo's health. He said that Huyen had just woken up, but she now wanted to be discharged, wanting to take Micah home. The doctor listened without replying immediately. He took Huyen and Appo's medical records to review and then called in other doctors for a consultation. Everyone took turns examining the test results and discussing Huyen and Appo's current condition for quite a while. After some discussion, the doctors made a decision. They took the medical records and together headed towards Huyen and Appo's hospital room. De walked beside them, feeling anxious, unsure of what the doctors would say about Huyen and Appo's wish to be discharged. The door to the hospital room gradually appeared in front, and Huyen was still lying on the bed, waiting for an answer. The doctor approached the bed to check on Huyen again. He measured her pulse, blood pressure, and examined her condition once more. This time, all the indicators had returned to stable levels. The doctor looked at Huyen, speaking gently but seriously, and quote, "Your current vital signs are normal, but you just regained consciousness after several days of unconsciousness, and your health is still very weak. Why do you want to be discharged now?" End quote. Huyen said, end quote, "I want to go home, doctor." End quote. She didn't and Appo's know how to explain the medical bills and the difficulties De was facing. The doctor turned to Da and said, end quote, "Come with me to the on-call room for a moment. We need to discuss her condition in more detail." End quote. Da approached the bed, gently helped Huyen sit up, then propped up her pillow so she could lie more comfortably. Seeing Huyen and Appo's still weak face, he sighed softly. Huyen held Do and Appo's hand, tears welling up again. End quote, "I want to go home. Please take me home, I beg you." End quote. Da sat down beside her, looked at her for a long time, then gently said, end quote, "You just woke up, you and Appo's still very weak. I and Appo's am just worried that if I take you home now, something might happen." End quote. Huyen still shook her head, her voice choked. End quote, "I don't and Appo's want to stay here anymore. I want to go home with Micah." End quote. Da walked into the duty room to find the doctor. As soon as he saw him, the doctor asked, end quote, "Does the patient still want to go home?" End quote. Da nodded gently. The doctor looked at him and then said seriously, end quote, "If the family decides to discharge the patient at this time, I must clearly state that her health is still very weak. If any issues arise after she goes home, the hospital will not be responsible. You need to sign the voluntary discharge agreement." End quote. Da stood still, looking at the document placed in front of him. He thought for a long time, torn between keeping Huyen for further treatment and fulfilling her wish to go home. Finally, Da took the pen and signed the agreement. After placing the pen down, he looked at the paper for a moment and then stood up. Although he had decided to take Huyen home, he couldn't and Appo's help but worry about her health. The doctor handed Da a prescription and advised him to buy all the medications listed. Da took it, bent down and read through each line. As he looked at the list of medicines, his face gradually became worried. Da reached into his shirt pocket, took out all the remaining money and counted it. The few bills he had were stacked and counted repeatedly, but there wasn't Appo's much left. He stood still, lost in thought for a long time. His eyes looked down at the heavy amount of money in his hand. I can only sigh, put the little amount of money back into my shirt pocket. I hold the prescription tightly in my hand, trying to hide my worry, carefully fold the prescription and then stand up. I quietly walk back to the hospital room, where Huyen and Micah are still waiting. The hospital door closes behind me. I sit down again beside the bed. Look at Huyen and then at Micah, trying to hide the worries filling my heart. In the small house back in my hometown, Hippie still lies on the porch, eyes facing outward toward the door. The small dog patiently waits, still believing that soon Huyen, Micah, and I will return home. Outside, the day continues to pass. But inside the hospital, the three of us still try to stay together, hoping that a peaceful day will return to our small house. If everyone loves Huyen and Micah and Apos, S mother and child, please subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications, and leave a word of encouragement for the two of them to see the next developments. Every follow and every loving comment from everyone will be a source of comfort and strength to help Huyen get through difficult times. Thank you all very much.